Imagine standing at the edge of everything we know about human civilization. Behind you stretches roughly 6,000 years of recorded history, pyramids and empires, writing systems and cities, the entire tapestry of what we call civilization. But now turn around and look forward into the abyss of time that came before. What you're staring into is not just darkness. It's a chasm of nearly 100,000 years where anatomically modern humans, people with brains identical to yours and mine, walked this earth and left almost nothing behind but whispers carved in stone and bones, scattered in forgotten caves. These weren't primitive apes learning to stand upright. These were us, fully formed, fully capable, with the same cognitive potential as the person reading this right now. So here's the question that should keep you awake at night. What were they doing for all that time? We're taught a comfortable narrative in school, a neat progression from cave dweller to farmer to city builder. But that story glosses over something profoundly disturbing. Homo sapiens emerged in Africa roughly 300,000 years ago, and by 200,000 years ago, we had achieved our modern form. Our brains reached their current size and structure. The hardware was complete. Yet the first permanent settlements, the first hints of what we'd recognize as civilization, don't appear until around 10,000 years ago with the agricultural revolution. That leaves a staggering gap of time, an ocean of centuries where humans who were biologically and mentally identical to us were doing something, living somehow, but we have almost no idea what. Think about that. In just the last 6,000 years, we went from mud huts to smartphones, from pictographs to artificial intelligence. What could possibly explain why people with the exact same capabilities took 100,000 years to get started? The archaeological record from this period is maddeningly sparse, a jigsaw puzzle with 99% of its pieces missing. We find stone tools, yes, scattered across continents like breadcrumbs from a feast we weren't invited to. We find evidence of fire, burial sites that suggest spiritual beliefs, cave paintings that explode with artistic sophistication. But these fragments only deepen the mystery. The tools remain relatively unchanged for tens of thousands of years. Why no rapid innovation? The cave paintings at Lascaux and Chauvet, created 30,000 years ago, demonstrate such technical mastery and artistic vision that modern artists study them with reverence. These weren't primitive scratchings. These were created by minds that understood perspective, movement, symbolism. They were us painting by firelight on limestone walls. But why didn't those same minds with that same creative capacity build anything lasting? Where are their temples, their monuments, their cities? Some researchers point to climate as the culprit, and there's merit to this explanation, at least on the surface. The period we're discussing encompasses the last ice age, a time of brutal environmental conditions. Glaciers covered much of the northern hemisphere. These levels were hundreds of feet lower than today, exposing vast coastal plains that are now underwater. Human populations were small, scattered constantly on the move to follow game and avoid the worst of the cold. Survival took precedence over everything else. Building a permanent structure makes no sense when you need to migrate with the seasons. Writing serves little purpose in a society without complex trade networks or administrative needs. From this perspective, the missing 100,000 years aren't missing at all. They were simply a holding pattern, humans waiting for the climate to cooperate before they could unleash their full potential. But this explanation, satisfying as it might seem, crumbles under scrutiny. Humans didn't just survive during this period, they thrived. They spread across the entire globe, from the southern tip of Africa to the frozen reaches of Siberia, from Southeast Asia to the Americas. This wasn't the behavior of a species barely clinging to existence. This was successful adaptation on a scale almost unprecedented in the animal kingdom. Modern humans reached Australia at least 65,000 years ago, a journey that required sophisticated boat building and navigation across open ocean. They penetrated deep into the Amazon rainforest, one of Earth's most challenging environments. They survived in the Arctic, developing specialized tools and clothing that wouldn't be improved upon until modern times. These accomplishments required planning, cooperation, innovation, and transmitted knowledge. These required civilization, or at least something very much like it. So why do we see so little evidence of it? Here's where the mystery takes on an almost sinister quality. What if the evidence isn't missing? What if we're looking in the wrong places? Consider that sea levels during the Ice Age were dramatically lower than today. Vast stretches of land that would have been prime real estate, coastal areas with access to both marine and terrestrial resources, are now hundreds of feet underwater. If early humans preferred coastal living, as many anthropologists now believe, then their settlements, their innovations, their entire way of life might be submerged beneath the oceans. We've barely explored these continental shelves. The few underwater archaeological sites we've discovered hint at sophisticated cultures that existed during this period, structures and artifacts that challenge our assumptions about what was possible. The puzzle is simply hidden beneath the waves, waiting for technology advanced enough to find it. But there's another possibility, one that's even more unsettling. What if early humans did develop forms of civilization, but they were so fundamentally different from what we recognize that we literally can't see them? Our entire archaeological framework is built around certain assumptions. That civilization means permanent structures, agriculture, writing, concentrated populations. But what if there were other paths? What if some groups developed sophisticated oral traditions so powerful, so precise, that they functioned as effectively as writing for knowledge transmission? What if they built with organic materials, wood and fiber, and living plants, creating complex settlements that returned entirely to nature within years of being abandoned? What if their spiritual and social structures were so refined that they needed no monumental architecture, no temples or palaces, because their civilization existed primarily in the realm of ideas and relationships? From our perspective, studying the physical remains they left behind, such a culture would be nearly invisible. We'd see only the stone tools and bones, miss entirely the rich tapestry of knowledge, art, and social organization that made up their actual lives. The genetic evidence adds yet another layer to this enigma, and frankly, it's the kind of evidence that's hard to dismiss or reinterpret. Our DNA tells a story, and that story is bizarre. Studies of mitochondrial DNA, which passes from mother to child essentially unchanged, have traced the ancestry of all living humans back to a surprisingly small population that existed in Africa roughly 70,000 years ago. This discovery gave rise to the concept of mitochondrial Eve, the woman whose mitochondrial DNA is the common ancestor of all mitochondrial DNA in humans living today. But here's the disturbing part. The genetic diversity within that ancestral population was extremely limited, suggesting that at some point, the human population crashed to perhaps as few as 10,000 breeding individuals, 10,000 people. That's all. The entire human species reduced to a number that could fit inside a modern sports stadium. Something happened 70,000 years ago, something catastrophic that nearly wiped us out. The leading candidate for this catastrophe is the eruption of Mount Toba in Sumatra, a volcanic event so massive that it dwarfs anything in recorded history. When Toba exploded, it ejected roughly 2,800 cubic kilometers of material into the atmosphere. For perspective, that's 5,000 times more powerful than the Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980. The eruption would have triggered a volcanic winter, plunging global temperatures and potentially lasting for years or even decades. Animals would have starved. The climate models suggest that this single event could have pushed humanity to the brink of extinction. But here's where it gets interesting. Some populations survived. Against all odds, scattered groups of humans endured this apocalyptic event and eventually repopulated the Earth. How? What knowledge, what adaptations, what sheer determination allowed them to survive when so many other species didn't? The answer to that question might be locked in the behavior and capabilities that humans had already developed by that point. By 70,000 years ago, humans had been anatomically modern for well over 100,000 years. They had accumulated knowledge about their environments, about fire, about tool making, about social organization. Some researchers believe that this near-extinction event might have actually accelerated human development, creating a selection pressure that favored the most intelligent, most adaptable, most cooperative groups. The survivors would have been the best of the best, and they would have passed on not just their genes but their knowledge to future generations. In this view, the Toba catastrophe was a crucible that forged modern human cognition and culture. We're not just the descendants of those survivors, Enginzels. We're the product of whatever made them special enough to survive when everything else died. But this raises an uncomfortable question. If humans 70,000 years ago were capable enough to survive a volcanic winter, capable enough to maintain their social structures and knowledge systems through years of darkness and cold, why did it still take them another 60,000 years to develop agriculture and cities? The Toba survivors weren't starting from scratch. They had tens of thousands of years of accumulated knowledge behind them. They had language, they had fire, they had sophisticated stone tools, they probably had art and music and spiritual beliefs. They had everything necessary for civilization except civilization itself. What was still missing? Or alternatively, what were they doing that we're not recognizing as civilized? Perhaps the real mystery isn't why civilization took so long to develop, but why we're so certain that what came before wasn't already civilization in a form we don't understand. Consider the Aboriginal Australians, whose ancestors reached Australia at least 65,000 years ago and maintained a continuous culture until European contact. For tens of thousands of years, they developed one of the most sophisticated knowledge systems ever created, encoding information about their environment, their history, and their beliefs into songlines, dreaming tracks that crisscrossed the continent. These weren't simple stories. They were precise navigational maps, ecological encyclopedias, legal systems, and historical records all woven together into oral traditions so exact that they've been verified against modern geographical data. Some Aboriginal stories describe coastal features that were submerged when sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age, meaning these oral traditions accurately preserved information for over 10,000 years. That's longer than all of recorded history. Yet because Aboriginal culture didn't build pyramids or develop writing, it was dismissed by European colonizers as primitive. How many other sophisticated cultures existed during the missing 100,000 years? Cultures that we're missing entirely because they don't fit our narrow definition of civilization. The cave art provides tantalizing clues, though like everything else from this period, it raises more questions than it answers. The paintings at Chauvet Cave in France, dated to around 36,000 years ago, aren't crude stick figures. They're masterpieces demonstrating sophisticated techniques like shading, perspective, and the use of the cave wall's natural contours to create three-dimensional effect. The artists who created them understood animal anatomy intimately, capturing not just the appearance but the essence of movement and behavior. They used multiple pigments carefully prepared from minerals and organic materials. They worked by flickering torchlight in the depths of the cave, and they created something that still resonates emotionally with viewers today. These weren't artists learning their craft. These were masters working in a fully developed artistic tradition. But where did that tradition come from? Art this sophisticated doesn't emerge fully formed. It requires generations of knowledge transmission, of teaching and learning, of experimentation and refinement. It requires, in other words, exactly the kind of stable cultural continuity that we associate with civilization. And it's not just the quality of the art that's mysterious. It's the subject matter and context. Many of these paintings are located in deep cave systems, far from natural light, in chambers that required significant effort and danger to reach. Why? Some researchers suggest they were part of ritual activities, perhaps shamanic practices involving altered states of consciousness. The caves might have been considered portals to another world, liminal spaces where the boundary between the physical and spiritual dissolved. If this interpretation is correct, then these paintings represent evidence of complex religious beliefs and practices, the kind of sophisticated spiritual systems that typically accompany advanced cultures. But again, where are the other markers of that advancement? Where are the settlements, the tools that should have accompanied such a rich intellectual and spiritual life? Recent discoveries have begun to chip away at our ignorance, though each answer seems to spawn a dozen new questions. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, archaeologists uncovered a site that's rewriting everything we thought we knew about the progression from hunter-gatherer to farmer. Built roughly 12,000 years ago, before the development of agriculture, before pottery, before any of the technological markers we associate with settled life. Göbekli Tepe consists of massive stone pillars arranged in circles, carved with intricate reliefs of animals and abstract symbols. Some of these pillars weigh more than 10 tons. Moving them, shaping them, arranging them required organization, planning, and a significant labor force. More importantly, it required a reason. Why would supposedly simple hunter-gatherers invest the enormous time and energy needed to create this place? The site offers no evidence of permanent habitation. It wasn't a settlement. It was something else, possibly a ceremonial center, a gathering place for dispersed populations who came together for rituals we can only guess at. The implications are staggering. Göbekli Tepe suggests that complex social organization and monumental architecture preceded agriculture, not the other way around as we always assume. For decades, the standard narrative held that agriculture allowed populations to settle down, and settled populations led to specialization, social hierarchy, and eventually the building of temples and monuments. Göbekli Tepe flips this sequence. It suggests that humans first organized themselves for religious or social purposes, creating monumental centers, and only later developed agriculture to support these gathering places. If this is true, then religion or perhaps social bonding wasn't a byproduct of civilization. It was the driving force behind it. But if hunter-gatherers 12,000 years ago could organize themselves to build Göbekli Tepe, what might their ancestors have built 10,000 years before that? Or 50,000 years before that? And if those earlier structures were made of wood or other organic materials, or if they're now underwater, would we ever find them? The discovery of Göbekli Tepe opened the floodgates for reconsidering other anomalies. Across the world, there are sites and artifacts that don't fit neatly into our timeline. In Brazil, cave paintings in the Serra da Capivara have been controversially dated to as much as 25,000 years ago, suggesting that humans reached South America far earlier than the traditionally accepted date of 15,000 years ago. So, in the Philippines, butchered rhinoceros bones associated with stone tools have been dated to over 700,000 years ago, suggesting that some human species, perhaps Homo erectus, had reached these isolated islands incredibly early. Each of these discoveries pushes back the timeline of human capability, human migration, human achievement. Each one suggests that the story we tell ourselves about human history is incomplete at best and fundamentally wrong at worst. Then there are the artifacts that simply shouldn't exist according to conventional timelines. The Blombos Cave in South Africa has yielded ochre stones engraved with geometric patterns dated to 75,000 years ago. These aren't random scratches. They're deliberate, systematic designs, possibly symbolic, possibly decorative, possibly communicating information we can't decode. They represent abstract thinking, the ability to conceive of and create symbolic representations. They represent, in other words, modern human cognition in full flower 75,000 years ago. But if humans were capable of symbolic thought that long ago, what else were they capable of? Were they telling stories, creating myths, developing philosophical ideas about their place in the universe? Did they have names for the stars, theories about the seasons, debates about ethics and morality? We have no way to know, because thoughts and words don't fossilize. All we have are these scratched stones, silent witnesses to minds that worked just like ours. The Venus figurines present another puzzle. Scattered across Europe and Asia, these small sculptures of female figures with exaggerated sexual characteristics date from roughly 30,000 to 25,000 years ago. Dozens have been found, suggesting they were part of a widespread cultural tradition. What did they represent? Fertility goddesses, ancestors, idealized women, pornography, self-portrait? Every interpretation has been proposed, and none can be proven. What we do know is that creating these figurines required skill, time, and purpose. They weren't accidental. They weren't practice pieces. They were made deliberately, presumably for some important reason, by people who invested significant effort in their creation. This indicates value systems, aesthetic preferences, possibly religious beliefs. It indicates culture in the fullest sense of the word. But again, this culture existed in the middle of the Ice Age, among populations we're told were struggling just to survive. Something doesn't add up. Consider the technical sophistication evident in some Ice Age tools. At Sungur, a site in Russia dated to around 30,000 years ago, archaeologists discovered burials that included clothing decorated with thousands of ivory beads. Experimental archaeology has shown that each bead would have taken about an hour to manufacture. The burial of one child included over 5,000 beads. That represents 5,000 hours of labor, roughly 2.5 years of full-time work invested in decorating the burial clothing of a single individual. What kind of society can afford that level of investment in purely aesthetic or ceremonial objects? Not a society on the edge of starvation. Not a society where every waking moment is devoted to finding the next meal. The Sungur burials indicate surplus, specialization, and social complexity. They indicate a society that had solved the basic problems of survival so thoroughly that they could devote enormous resources to ceremony and status display. They indicate, in short, something very much like civilization. Or take the bone flutes found at various European sites, some dating back 40,000 years. These aren't simple whistles. They're carefully crafted musical instruments with precisely drilled holes positioned to produce specific scales. Making them required knowledge of acoustics, tool-making skill, and presumably a musical tradition sophisticated enough to require and value such instruments. Music, like art, doesn't emerge in a vacuum. It develops over time through experimentation and teaching, through cultural transmission across generations. These flutes are evidence of not just individual creativity, but of musical traditions that must have stretched back centuries or millennia before the instruments themselves were made. They're evidence of culture, of entertainment, of aesthetic values beyond mere survival. They're evidence of humanity living, not just existing. Perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that we're asking the wrong question entirely. We keep asking what were humans doing for 100,000 years, as if they were waiting around for something to happen, as if history is a linear progression towards some inevitable destination with civilization as the goal. But what if they weren't waiting? What if they had already arrived, just at a destination we don't recognize? What if the missing 100,000 years aren't missing at all, but simply recorded in languages we haven't learned to read? The archaeological record is, by its nature, biased toward the durable and the monumental. Stone survives, ceramics survive, bronze and gold survive, but wood rots, leather decays, fiber disintegrates, and organic materials return to the earth within decades or centuries at most. If a culture built primarily with these materials, their physical presence would vanish almost completely, leaving only the stone tools they happen to use and the bones from their meals. Imagine a society that solved the challenges of existence not through permanent architecture, but through intimate knowledge of their environment. They would build temporary shelters suited to each season, leaving no foundations for archaeologists to find. They would manage wild plant populations through careful selective harvesting and deliberate burning, techniques that look like pure nature to modern eyes. They would hunt sustainably, moving with animal migrations rather than fencing and domesticating. They would transmit knowledge through oral traditions so exact and comprehensive that writing would be redundant. Their social bonds would be maintained through ritual, story, and kinship networks, rather than through laws carved in stone. From inside such a culture, life would be rich, complex, meaningful. From outside, thousands of years later, it would be nearly invisible. We would see only the stone points they used for hunting and conclude they were primitive, never suspecting the vast ocean of knowledge and culture that left no physical trace. This isn't just speculation. We have historical examples of cultures that operated exactly this way. The indigenous peoples of Australia, the Americas, and various other regions maintained sophisticated societies for thousands of years with minimal permanent architecture or material culture that would survive archaeologically. When Europeans encountered these cultures, they often dismissed them as primitive precisely because they didn't build cities or accumulate material wealth. But anthropologists who actually studied these societies discovered intricate kinship systems, sophisticated ecological knowledge, complex belief systems, detailed oral histories, and social structures that worked remarkably well for the environments in which they existed. These weren't failed attempts at civilization. They were successful alternative approaches to human organization. If such societies could exist in the recent past, why not in the deep past? Why not for the entire 100,000 years we think of as prehistoric? There's another factor we rarely consider, the possibility of loss. Civilizations fall. That's one of the few constants of history. Empires rise and crumble. Cities are abandoned. Knowledge is forgotten. Writing systems become undecipherable. In just a few thousand years of recorded history, we've lost entire languages, technologies, and cultural practices. The Library of Alexandria burned. The secrets of Roman concrete were forgotten. The Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek analog computer of stunning sophistication, was so far ahead of its time that nothing comparable would be built for over 1,000 years. If we can lose knowledge in a few centuries, how much more could be lost across tens of thousands of years? Maybe early humans did develop advanced knowledge and capabilities, but the fragility of cultural transmission meant that much of it was lost and had to be rediscovered multiple times. Maybe we're not the first attempt at civilization, but the latest in a long series of rises and falls that left almost no trace. Climate change during this period was dramatic and frequent. Ice ages came and went. Sea levels rose and fell by hundreds of feet. Entire ecosystems transformed within the span of a few generations. Populations that thrived during favorable periods might have been decimated when conditions changed. The knowledge they accumulated, the social structures they built, the traditions they maintained, all could have been swept away by forces beyond their control. And unlike us, with our libraries and databases and redundant information storage, they had no way to preserve knowledge across catastrophic disruptions except through the memories and teachings of survivors. How many times might human cultures have reached sophisticated levels only to be thrown back by drought, by volcanic eruptions, by sudden climate shifts, by the megafaunal extinctions that eliminated key food sources? We might be looking at not one long period of stasis, but rather a series of rises and falls, of accumulated knowledge gained and lost and painfully regained. The megafaunal extinctions themselves are part of this mystery. All across the world, around the end of the last ice age, large mammals went extinct at an alarming rate. Mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and dozens of other species disappeared. The timing of these extinctions correlates closely with human expansion into new territories. Humans reached the Americas around 15,000 years ago, and within a few thousand years, the megafauna were gone. Similar patterns appear in Australia, Madagascar, and New Zealand. This has led many researchers to conclude that humans hunted these animals to extinction. But here's what's strange. These were experienced hunters, people who had coexisted with large game animals in Africa and Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years. Why would they suddenly drive their prey to extinction? Why wouldn't they manage populations sustainably, as they must have done previously? One possibility is that as these animals went extinct, often due to climate change and hunting pressure combined, the human societies that depended on them collapsed or transformed dramatically. The end of the Ice Age wasn't just a matter of warming temperatures. It represented the loss of entire ecosystems, entire ways of life. The people who had adapted so successfully to hunting mammoth on the tundra suddenly found themselves in forest, their prey gone, their carefully accumulated knowledge suddenly obsolete. They had to start over, developing new strategies, new tools, new social organizations suited to radically different circumstances. Maybe this is why agriculture finally emerged when it did. Not because humans suddenly got smarter, but because the animals they'd relied on for 100,000 years were gone, and they had no choice but to find new ways to feed themselves. Agriculture wasn't progress. It was adaptation to catastrophic change. So where does this leave us? After examining the evidence, the theories, the possibilities, and the puzzles, what can we actually say about those missing 100,000 years? The honest answer is that we don't know. And that uncertainty is itself significant. We're a species that sent robots to Mars, that mapped the human genome, that can manipulate matter at the atomic level, yet we cannot definitively explain what our own ancestors were doing for 95% of our existence as modern humans. That should be humbling. It should make us question our assumptions about progress, about intelligence, about what constitutes civilization. It should make us wonder what we might be missing about ourselves right now, what future archaeologists might puzzle over when they try to understand our own era. What we can say with confidence is that the people who lived during this period were not fundamentally different from us. They had the same brains, the same capacity for language and abstract thought, the same emotional range, the same curiosity and creativity. They loved and mourned. They created art. They gazed at the stars and wondered about their meaning. They solved complex problems, adapted to diverse environments, survived catastrophes that would challenge us even with our modern technology. They were not primitive. They were not waiting for civilization to be invented. They were living full, complex human lives, and the fact that those lives left so little material evidence doesn't make them any less real or important. If anything, it highlights the limitations of our methods, not the limitations of their humanity. The archaeological evidence we do have, sparse as it is, suggests that early humans were capable of remarkable things. They created art that still moves us. They built boats and navigated across oceans. They adapted to every climate zone on Earth. They developed tools sophisticated enough to require years to master. They buried their dead with ceremony, suggesting beliefs about life and death, about identity and the afterlife. They created symbolic objects whose meanings we can only guess at. They survived a volcanic winter that nearly exterminated the species. These aren't the accomplishments of primitive savages barely clinging to existence. These are the accomplishments of people every bit as human as we are, living in ways adapted to their circumstances. Perhaps the real lesson of the missing 100,000 years is about the nature of civilization itself. We tend to think of civilization as a specific set of things: cities, agriculture, writing, monumental architecture, centralized government. But maybe that's too narrow a definition. Maybe civilization is better understood as the accumulated knowledge and social organization that allows humans to live together successfully and pass that knowledge to future generations. By that definition, those Ice Age hunter-gatherers were civilized. They had knowledge systems adapted to their environments. They had social structures that maintained group cohesion. They had artistic and spiritual traditions that gave meaning to existence. They had languages rich enough to encode complex information. The fact that they didn't build pyramids doesn't make them any less civilized. It just means their civilization looked different from ours. There's also the uncomfortable possibility that we're the anomaly, not them. We live in a moment of explosive technological change that began just a few hundred years ago with the Industrial Revolution. We've grown so accustomed to rapid change that we assume it's the natural state of things, that progress is inevitable and constant. But what if it's not? What if stable, sustainable cultures that change very slowly are actually the norm for human existence, and we're living through a brief, possibly unsustainable explosion of innovation? Those 100,000 years of apparent stasis might not represent failure or stagnation. They might represent success, cultures that found ways to live well within their environments and saw no reason to change. From that perspective, it's not their lack of progress that needs explaining. It's our recent frenzy of change that's the anomaly requiring explanation. Consider what we're losing even as we gain new capabilities. Traditional knowledge systems, refined over thousands of years, are disappearing as indigenous cultures are assimilated or destroyed. Languages die every year, taking with them unique ways of understanding and categorizing the world. We're more connected than ever before, yet many people report feeling more isolated. We have more information at our fingertips than any generation in history, yet we struggle with misinformation and manipulation. We can produce more food than ever before, yet we're destroying the ecosystems that make agriculture possible. We live longer, healthier lives, yet we're riddled with diseases of civilization that our ancestors never faced. Progress is real, But it's not an unmixed blessing, and it comes with costs we're only beginning to understand. Maybe those Ice Age people, living in small groups in close connection with their environments, avoiding the diseases of crowding and the stress of modern life, had something we've lost. The missing 100,000 years also raises questions about the future. If it took anatomically modern humans that long to develop agriculture and cities, what does that say about the likelihood of other intelligent species in the universe doing the same? If civilization is as inevitable as we tend to assume, why did it take so long to appear? Are we just lucky that the conditions finally aligned, or did something specific need to happen first? And if our current form of civilization should collapse, would we be able to rebuild? Or would we face the same challenges that kept our ancestors from building cities for 100,000 years? For 100,000 years, we like to think of ourselves as fundamentally different from them, more advanced, more capable. But we're working with the same hardware they had. If they struggled to develop civilization despite having all the cognitive tools necessary, why should we assume we could easily rebuild if we lost what we have? Ultimately, the mystery of the missing 100,000 years is a mirror reflecting our own ignorance and assumptions back at us. It forces us to confront the limits of what we can know about the past and, by extension, what future generations might be able to know about us. It challenges our definitions of progress, civilization, and intelligence. It reminds us that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, that the failure to find something doesn't mean it wasn't there. Most importantly, it reminds us that the people who came before us were not inferior versions of ourselves. They were us, living in different circumstances, making different choices, solving different problems. Their lives mattered. Their knowledge mattered. Their knowledge mattered. Their experiences were as real and complex as ours. The fact that we can't fully reconstruct those lives doesn't diminish them. It diminishes only our understanding, leaving us standing at the edge of an abyss of time, staring into a darkness that stares back, filled with the ghost of 100,000 years of human experience we can barely glimpse. What were they doing all that time? Perhaps the answer is simple. They were living, and perhaps that's enough.